everyone, my name is Poe, and welcome to another episode of 365 Days of Praise, a series exploring the various contributions of people of color in the greater Tampa Bay area and beyond. This recurring program will highlight the work of community leaders, entrepreneurs, activists, educators, organizers, artists, and professionals striving towards the enlightenment and progress of those in the Black community and our willing allies. Today I'd like to introduce you to someone I've known for close to 20 years, someone I'd like to call a friend, Mr. Walter Wally B. Jennings.
Indeed, bro. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, we talked about how, this program will talk about community leaders, entrepreneurs, activists, educators separately. Sometimes that person can encapsulate all of those things, and this is something that Mr. Wally B does. So we'll get right into it. Mm-hmm. So Wally, where are you originally from, and what was it like your childhood?
So I'm actually born and reared here in Tampa, which is, I know for a lot of people a number of years ago, that was a big deal,
right? Because
there weren't a lot of native Tampanians.
Exactly.
But I'm from Tampa, reared here, and I had a really great supportive childhood. And even in retrospect, I was looking back. I come from a 2-parent home, from West Tampa, which is ironically one of the older communities in Tampa, and it's one of the communities that has a long history of thriving African Americans and also Hispanics together. And so my father owned his own business. My mother was a lifelong nurse, and very entrenched in the community. And so it was I'm the youngest of 3 children. And so again, it was for me, I always had this pride when it came to being from Tampa.
Okay, well that's great to hear. I lived in West Tampa for a time in high school, right off LaSalle. And just speaking of that area, as you've seen it change so much over the last few years, looking back on it, how it was when you grew up versus how it is now, what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, definitely a lot of changes. And as I mentioned, growing up in West Tampa, it was very distinct when it came to the culture of Black culture and then Latino or Spanish culture. And so again, I would leave from school, stop by Olympia, which was a Lessie bakery, get me some food, stop by my father's corner store, and it was always kind of this culture, this beautiful culture clash. And so obviously now with gentrification and some of the changes that have taken place, the North Boulevard homes being demolished and some of the new things that are being built, obviously it's a lot of change, and so for a lot of us that are from the area, it can be a bit heartbreaking, but I also think that it's a great reminder for us as well when it comes to our communities, making sure that we are in control of our property.
Exactly. That's an amazing answer. I appreciate that. So I first met you on the poetry scene, Black on Black rhyme in Tampa and such, but when did you first start to get in poetry?
So I actually was an 8th grader in middle school. And so my English teacher had given us an assignment to keep a diary. And I'm like, first of all, I'm a dude. I ain't doing no diary. But I'll do a journal, And so, because I didn't want to fail the class. And so one day my teacher came to me and she said, Walter, would you mind if I put some of your poems up on the bulletin board for your other classmates to see? I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, your journal entries are actually poems. And so a light bulb moment kind of went off for me. Because with studying the Walt Whitmans and the Robert Frost and the Maya Angelou's and the Phyllis Wheatley's and the Langston Hughes, and for my work to be, and obviously not in that caliber, but that I could write as well, and for it to be classified in that way, and for it to be my genuine experiences and thoughts, that was really encouraging for me. And so since for me, my journey with poetry started in the 8th grade. And so I wrote since then. A lot of people think that I'm a natural artist and I love writing. I do not like writing at all. I tell people
that's a shock to many.
Absolutely, I tell especially young people, like, I don't write because I love writing. I started writing because I had problems. And even with the story that I just shared, I started writing because it was something that was required of me. But I'm so glad because it provided me this outlet. It provided this opportunity to be a healthy mechanism to get some of these things out that I was dealing with internally.
That's amazing. Do you happen to remember the first poem that you wrote?
So I do not.
Okay.
I was thinking about that a couple of days ago because I was going through. My wife and I were actually putting together a poetry book. Okay. And so one of the but I do know one of the first poems that I wrote was a poem called "The Struggle."
Okay.
And so it was like I struggle with people, I struggle with things, but more importantly, I struggle with myself.
Okay.
And that's how the poem starts, and that's how it ends. Okay. In the middle says that there's a fight, there's a war that wages inside of me. Okay. And so the whole premise of it is that the struggle that we go through, the struggles that we go through externally really originate internally. Okay. And so that whole thing kind of circles around, but that was one of the first poems that I wrote.
The struggle. That's awesome. I had a song called that way back in the day. That's crazy. Let me ask you this. When did you realize that you were good?
Man, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't until I had actually gotten involved in spoken word. This was, to be honest, this was years after I started performing. Okay. This was years after like starting a poetry venue and getting a name. It wasn't until I was approached because I wasn't holding the community and people accountable for what they were, for what they needed to pay, like for me to feature and for like product. Right. You know, I was just doing stuff for free because it was, for me, it was all about the expression. It was about the art and it was about the love. Right. But I was like, why are people coming at me? Because it's like, you know, I'm just doing it for the love. Right. And again, it kind of clicked that, oh, I'm good. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, because again, if I suck, it wouldn't matter. But when you have a quality product, when you have quality art, when what you do is of value, sometimes it takes other people saying that, bruh, you don't need to just be giving that away. Right. And so for me, it really helped me to like take inventory of this gift and this talent that I had, that I had cultivated, because I absolutely did work at it. Right. Was like, oh, I have to be careful of making sure that people respect the art, because there are other artists that are also tied to this as well. And making sure that we get the things that we need, making sure that poetry is respected. When people do events, you know, they'll pay bands, they'll pay hosts, they'll pay comedians, they'll pay singers, but they'll always try to get a poet for free. And so admittedly, it took me a while to really understand that it was about that. Right. You know, it wasn't about, you know, this whole idea of forsaking and betraying my love for the arts and my integrity when it came to that for the coins. Right. But it was about holding people accountable to make sure that they held it in the proper value and esteem. Absolutely, absolutely.
So you talk about the spoken word, but let's take a step back, because the written word is different from the spoken word. Tell me about that transition from writing to actually getting on stage and performing and speaking that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I started writing when I was in the 8th grade. I did not share my poems publicly until my senior year in college.
Yeah. I was going to say high school,
absolutely,
college, okay.
Yeah. So you talk about 4 years as far as from 8th grade to 12th grade, and then 4 years from 12th grade to my senior year in college. So you're talking about 8 years writing but not performing. Gotcha. And so I was actually encouraged by my best friend at the time. Okay. There's a gentleman by the name, his name was Leon Williams. Okay. And a lot of people know him as DJ Breeze. Okay. So DJ Breeze was actually my best friend in high school. And so Breeze actually went to school at Tuskegee. Okay. And I went to Florida A&M in Tallahassee. Okay. And so moving on, as we became upperclassmen, it was probably my junior year, Breeze had reached out to me. He was like, Walt, man, because he wrote as well. Right. And we shared our poems with each other, but never publicly on the platform. Gotcha. And so he reached out to me when he was in Alabama and was like, Walt, you got to share your work, man. Like, I shared mine, people loved it. And I'm like, nah, man, I don't think people are really ready to hear my experiences and my perspectives and my stories. Right. And so he was badgering me for like the whole year. And so came around to my senior year in college. It was homecoming. It was about 2 months away from me graduating. Okay. It was October of 1998. I still remember it. Okay. And the Alphas did this open mic. This was back when Love Jones was popular. Okay. And so they did this open mic. And so I was like, you know what, man? I'm getting ready to graduate. Okay. So, you know, even if I suck, I'll hopefully never see these people again. Right, that's it. And I just so happened to have my notebook in the car. Okay. So I went out to the car. Okay. I got my notebook. Okay. I performed and got a standing ovation. Okay. Like, people loved it. Right. But the thing about it was there was a guy who came up to me after the fact. Okay. After everybody had kind of, you know, everything kind of settled down. And he was like, man, I just want to thank you for what you shared because I feel the same way. And I didn't think that anyone could relate to it. I didn't think anyone felt the way that I did. Right. And I realized in that moment that I had a responsibility not only to myself to ensure that I was really communicating my voice and the things that I thought, but to empower and encourage other people to do the same.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So again, like I said, I've known Wally for about 20 years, and I met him at Black on Black Rhyme. You know, I had written a lot of poetry before. I had performed some raps and such, but I'd never done spoken word. So tell us a little bit about Black on Black Rhyme and the Conscious Party, if you would.
Yeah. So after I performed that first time, I was like, something's here. You know, like I had always written, but performing when, like, as you mentioned, when you move from poetry to spoken word, like, that's a big jump. There's a lot of people that write. But, you know, when you incorporate public speaking, people fear public speaking more than death.
Exactly.
And so there's a liberation and there's a freedom that takes place when you really stand up and stand in your truth and express it in that way. And so for me, I was like, man, there's something here, and I don't really know what it is. But I want to lean into it and see where this goes. And so after that, I met a gentleman by the name of Keith Rogers. And Keith is the founder of Black on Black Rhyme and a organization called the Back Talk Poetry Tree. And so Black on Black Rhyme and Back Talk Poetry was the first poetry collective that I saw that really served as this amalgamation and this inclusive community of, like, poetry and spoken word artists. Whereas during that time in the late 90s, as I mentioned, you had poetry, it fell in normally like 3 categories. It was either like this whole Love Jones kind of vibe, where it's just like, you know, everybody just overly sappy or super erotic. You had the black nationalists, like really militant. Or you had the really, like, spaced out, esoteric, just kind of like really, you know, poetry's kind of out there. And so what I saw is that poetry is really siloed for me, spoken word in that way. Black on Black Rhyme was the first entity that I ran into that really created space for all of those together, and it was beautiful. It was. And so experiencing that in Tallahassee, which is where it started. And so when I came back home to Tampa, and there wasn't a poetry venue. Matter of fact, there was a young lady who she tried to start a poetry night. She did it one night, and then, like, nobody hardly showed up, and then she stopped doing it. And I was like, well, she don't know the city. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I'm from the city. I know the city. I think this is needed. And so I talked to Keith, and I was like, Keith, I really would like to start a Black on Black Rhyme here because I believe in the platform and what the show represents and what it's all about. And so he gave his blessing. And so Black on Black Rhyme Tampa was the first Black on Black Rhyme outside of Tallahassee. We now have shows in Tallahassee, in Tampa, in Mobile, Alabama, in Columbia, South Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. And then also over in Palm Bay, Florida as well. And then we also have one over in Abu Dhabi in Dubai. So it's international. Yeah, man, it's really proud. Oh, in North Carolina as well. I'm sorry, Fayetteville, North Carolina. And some of the shows I forget, but yeah, we have an international representation. You know, and again, it's based on that same platform of really creating space for all voices. And let me tell you something. I mean, what an amazing experience Black on Black Rhyme for me was and still is. I mean, it was just a place of just beautifulness. I mean, the people, the atmosphere, the words that were spoken there, you know, I remember back some of the best times of my life, you know, truthfully. And you know, because Wally B and the Conscious Party, you know, so I want to thank you all for that. It was an amazing experience that I'll take with me forever. You know, so I do appreciate that. So then from that, you know, again, you're multiple things you do well at. So what motivated you to go into ministry? And what role did faith play in your life? Yeah, so for me, faith in church, like, that was always a part of my foundation. I grew up in church, and so it was something that was always ingrained in me. And when I went off to college, you know, like a lot of us, I couldn't wait to not have to go to church. You know, couldn't wait to, like, went from going Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night to I ain't got to go at all. Okay, cool.
Right.
And so I stopped going to church when I went to college. Okay. And just would have to go when I came home. Right. And went through a lot of trials and tribulations and challenges that actually, forced me to go back on my faith and really lean into it. Right. Getting into poetry was a big part of that, because obviously as you're really delving into the creative process and learning and understanding who you are, it's like, stuff all over the place. And so you need something to ground you. I equate it to here in the United States, right? If you live on the East Coast, you're susceptible to hurricanes. Right. If you live in the Midwest, you got tornadoes. Right. And if you're on the West Coast, you got earthquakes. Right. And in each one of those natural disasters, right, the key is, like in every situation, you want to find some place of stability. Right. Like you want to find something that grounds you. Yep. And so it's the same thing for me, that my spirituality is what grounds me. Right. And so even as I began to grow with spoken word and start poetry shows and things of that nature, it always came back to, where am I writing from? Right. And so my faith and my spirituality was always tugging at me, even beyond like just being a churchgoer. Right. And so for me, it was really reconnecting with God through my words, through my art, being mindful of what I was saying, why I was saying it, and obviously remaining committed to my own individual growth as well. Okay, well that's great, because there's always there's a big thing, between spirituality and religion and such, and were there conflicts with going to the spoken word spot? Great people there and things like that, but was it ever something tugging at you that said, is this the right thing for me? Am I walking in the right path with this? Or were you always able to compartmentalize and say, hey, I'm still walking that straight path. I can speak poetry about this and still be about God? And tell me about that a little bit. It was an absolute struggle. Okay. And combined with the fact that, if you bear in mind, as you mentioned, we have known each other over 20 years. Right. So we're talking about, I'm in my early 20s. Right. I'm married. Right. I'm getting a name in poetry. Right. I'm starting poetry venues. Right. And I'm figuring out all this stuff together while also trying to understand myself. Right. So my life was just it was all over the place. Right. And so absolutely I was conflicted, and I'm not sure if you remember, but like even after probably, I believe it was 4 or 5 years of Black on Black Rhyme, I actually took a step back. Right. Because as I was looking at my marriage, as I was looking at my life, and being celebrated in the community with what I was doing with poetry, at home, and my personal life was just in shambles. Gotcha. I was struggling with drinking. I was struggling with, trying to remain true to the vows of my marriage, just really struggling in that regard. And I'm like, as you mentioned, I'm doing this great work with this art, but how am I living? Am I really embodying the things that I'm saying? Am I really allowing the word and the work to work inside of me? Right. Am I really embodying that? Right. Or am I just, just kind of playing a role and being a charlatan, so to speak? Exactly. And so for me, absolutely. So that taking a step back was a really big move for me, because I love poetry. Right. And I loved helping people to find their voices. Exactly. But I knew that I couldn't continue to operate in that way. And because, first of all, my hypocrisy was going to catch up with me, and also I was going to lose my marriage, and my life was just going to continue to, devolve into something that I didn't want. Right. And so, so for me, it was taking a step back, and I'm so grateful to God that even as I recommitted my life to Christ, as I, took some of the things that were out of my work. I'm like, I'm not cussing. Right. There's certain things that I'm like, I'm going to take these things out of my work, and being afraid that, okay, is my work still going to be as powerful? Exactly. Is it still going to resonate? Right. Is it going to be relevant? Right. And so thankfully, it became for me even better. Right. Without having a lot of those shackles on me. When it came to who I was growing into, and just remaining committed to my authentic voice in that way.
Man, that's amazing. That's so dope. So dope. So okay, so from that, just talk about a little bit about your professional career. Where you've been, where you like to go, and where you are now.
Yeah, so I have had my career professionally has been in higher education via philanthropy And so working in a foundation and really helping to support students in higher education to get funding, professional development, mentoring, which is in alignment with the work that I was doing with young people in art and poetry. And so I've been very fortunate over the past, really like now, let's see, 13 years to really focus on youth development. And looking for opportunities and really helping to cultivate young people to find their voice, but also find their passion, find their path, to help their parents understand that, look, they may not necessarily want to be a doctor. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to take care of themselves. There are other if we help them figure out exactly what their passions and their gifts and their tools are, those things are going to guide them into careers that they're going to be able to sustain themselves. So you don't have to be afraid. And so really working with young people in that way on the artistic side, and then also on the professional side as well, which I now work for an amazing education foundation. Which is completely autonomous. They're not tied to the government, and so they're involved on the political side. So a lot of the things that are taking place when it comes to the political atmosphere here in Florida, they're actually helping to combat those things. And so to be a part of a movement like that, and to still be able to provide financial support and guidance for young people has really been a passion of mine. I really, really enjoy it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So do you feel like the programs that you have been a part of in education have been able to make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very proud. And as a matter of fact, someone asked me, like, with some of the youth artistry that I've had the chance to do, like, what's my greatest accomplishment? And I had to pause for a second. And what I responded with was, I'm proud of the fact that of all the young people that I've had the chance to work with, they know who they are, or they're at least on the path to really discover that. They've got it. They have that awareness and that awakening. And so that was really important because, again, as I mentioned with my path, I was 20 years old, trying to manage and balance, all of these things. You're talking about, being a husband, fatherhood, professionalism, community work, but really trying to get a grasp and understand who I was, and so when it comes to a lot of these youth programs, being able to have those courageous conversations and challenge them earlier to really take that serious, to really take inventory of, look, what are you passionate about? What do you really love to do? What do you get in trouble for? Because most of the time, the thing with young people, what you get in trouble for is a hint at what it is that you've really been gifted and what you've been given the ability to do. So it's really harnessing that and devoting and really pointing it in the right productive direction. And so absolutely, whether it's on the professional side, whether it's been on the community side, as far as working with young people, I'm very proud of the programs that I've been able to be a part of. And and the young people that have really come out of it with this greater sense of awareness.
Okay, that's excellent. That's excellent. So let's see. We're jumping into this. So traditionally there have been a lot of stigmas associated with mental health in the Black community. It seems that there's been a larger focus on that since the pandemic began, and as a society, just as a whole, and Black people specifically, how it's been, prayed away, this or that, was things we used to hear a lot about in the past, but I think it's been getting some more focus lately. Have you seen the increase of talks to call to actions that will lead to change in that?
Absolutely. And so again, growing up in the church, I heard those same exact things, where when it came to someone having mental health challenges, when it came to certain psychological diagnoses and things of that nature, it was always just prayed away. Jesus will fix it. But when you think about it, and for those of us who are in Christendom, we believe that we're three-part beings, that we are spirit, we have a soul, which has our mental and psychological capacities, and we live in a body. And so in that, no one ever says that if you're overweight, just pray it away. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to the physical side, we've got it down that there's work that I need to do on the physical side in order to ensure that I maintain that house. However, because of how on the mental side that is really interwoven with our soul and so intrinsically connected with our spirit, we have this idea that if I just focus on the spirit, there isn't any work that I need to do on the mental side, and that's just simply not true. And so there is work that needs to be done on the mental side. There is work that we need to do to make sure that we're cultivating our psychological well-being. And so, and the thing is, it doesn't have to be separate from our faith. You know, it doesn't have to conflict. It doesn't have to conflict with what we believe in from a spiritual standpoint. And so, to be honest, I'm really excited just about us being open to the conversations of it. You know, whereas again, back in the day, it was, you know, not even anything, you didn't mention it. You know, it was a lack of faith. It was, you know, you're trusting man over God. And so now at least churches being willing to open their doors. To have these conversations with psychologists, to have these, to allow their therapists to have panel discussions and different things of that nature, to really talk about the importance of spiritual and mental wellness. And I'm actually going to be on a panel discussion next Saturday, as a matter of fact, that's focused on Black men and health and wellness. You know, and so, you know, those types of things, to have those platforms now is really, really exciting. We've got a long way to go, but I just think it's a really exciting time. But just making sure that we keep it in the right context, as it relates to not allowing ourselves to deviate and move so far away from the spirit that we just become dependent on those things and we lose sight of our spiritual foundation.
That's excellent answer. I love that. So I'm gonna throw a little curve on this one. You know, you've been serious, you've been talking about a lot of other things, but let's take it back to this. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
So ever since I was little, I have always dreamed about being able to fly. Like, I just think that would just be the coolest thing, to just like you know, like Superman or like some of this, like to just walk out and just like fly, you know. And so you know, that would be like the coolest day ever. You know, be able to take a day and just fly around. And so for me, and it's interesting because I don't dream a lot, and I don't remember a lot of my dreams. But two things are usually very consistent in my dreams. In my dreams, I can fly. And for some reason, in my dreams, like I don't have a voice. Like I'm hoarse. Like and it's the most peculiar thing. But it's like I don't really have a voice, but I can fly. Like in my dreams, and that's been ever since I was little.
All right, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I like that. That's a great superpower to have. Okay, so let's see. What does family mean to you?
Oh man, family for me is the building block of society. I believe that family is the first church. You know, for me, and I tell my wife this all the time. Like when I thought about getting married, having children, having a family, that was the pinnacle and the important thing that I wanted to accomplish. Like it wasn't making a whole bunch of money. It wasn't being a CEO. It wasn't owning my own business. Like it was none of that. It was having a functional, strong family that feared God, that you know, that was excited about life, that we could really enjoy. Like I believe that again, family is the cornerstone of society and community. And so part of the reason why our societies and our cities and our neighborhoods are the way that they are is because I believe we need to not only get back to God, but we need to get back to family. You know, we need to get back to the village mentality, you know, where we take an interest in one another, you know. And so this whole mentality again of my, you know, being my brother's keeper, you know, being a good neighbor, you know, all of those things I think really are a part of the construct and the peripheral work of what family does.
All right, well, we finished the basic question that I had. Is there anything else that you want to add on before we close out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned as relates to like the work of finding self and things of that nature, and also with being married and that being kind of the building block of society. And so my wife and I, we actually have been doing premarital counseling since 2018. And so we have always, well, we haven't always, but we've subscribed to the notion that I was created for an individual purpose, and she was brought into my life to support me in that. She was created for an individual purpose, and I was brought in her life to help her fulfill that commitment that God made her for. But then there's also this collective purpose, right? And so identifying exactly what those things are and how to support one another has really been the journey within our marriage. And so for us, we actually have created a business called Chosen Life Specialists. We specialize in premarital counseling. We really want to come alongside young couples, and by young couples we don't mean just young in age, but just young couples when it comes to getting young in marriage and making sure that they've got a good handle on what are some of the potential challenges and things that you need to anticipate when it comes to coming together as one unit. How are you going to support one another? How are you going to support, and are you willing to identify and to respect someone else's individuality, or do you see individuality as an enemy to the collective unit? So having those conversations on the front side rather than getting into a marriage and not really having those, we feel is really important. And so also we specialize in marriage wellness and individual wellness as well, because you can't have a healthy marriage without having two healthy individuals. So that individual work is really, really important. And so we've been doing this work since 2018, but we're just going to be doing a formal business launch this coming April 2024, and then that's going to coincide with our book release as well. We're going to be releasing a daily devotional called Chosen Live 365, and so everything that we do is arts infused because we're both artists as well, and so we really want to challenge people again to kind of step outside of their box, be creative, and we think that it's a really important part of them really uncovering their best selves. And so we're really excited about that, and we're asking people to come alongside and to support us in that.
So I'd ask this: how early, I guess, in a relationship, because I know do up to marriage and through marriage, would you consider seeing a couple? Does certain things have to happen formally, I guess, to say, hey, okay, now you're ready to come see us, or how does that work?
So for us, what we advise is that when a couple gets engaged, like when you know that, hey, I believe this is my one, you need to make sure that premarital counseling is a part of your coordination to getting married. And what you'll find is that the majority of people, they invest, and they have no problem spending all their money on the wedding. They have no problem spending all their money on the party. But how much have you invested in the marriage? How much have you invested in the actual union? And so what premarital counseling actually does is it allows you to do the grunt work. It's not just a financial commitment, but it also is a mental and spiritual commitment as well. Because we dig all the way in. We talk about communication. We talk about finances. We talk about sex and intimacy. We talk about friends. We talk about foundational family. We talk about how do you show up during trauma and tragedy and stress. What happens when somebody loses their job? So all of those questions and things we deal with during premarital, so that way you're armed and prepared and equipped for it.
Have you been surprised at what you've learned from the people that you've counseled to put in effect maybe into your own marriage? Or is that something that's come up?
To be perfectly honest, I haven't been surprised because for me, similar to poetry, I always go into it looking to learn from other people. And so like even whether I'm working with young people, whether it was an adult poetry show, like when I go to shows, like I'm not there to converse and I'm Wally B. No. I'm there to learn. I'm there to glean from people. And so for me it's the same type of mentality when it comes to counseling. I learn so much and am so appreciative when couples and individuals trust us to speak into their lives, and there's again, and we say it's a partnership, whereas we may have a level of expertise. Charmaine and I, as of March 2024, we would have been married 24 years. We've overcome infidelity, we've overcome addiction, we have a child with special needs, and so we have a lot to offer in the way of those experiences when it comes to resilience and the lessons we've learned. But at the same time, when we meet these couples and individuals, they're coming with experiences too. So to your point, absolutely, like we learn so much, and I'm always so appreciative when couples are willing to trust us to partner with them in the process.
Oh, that's amazing, man. That's amazing. So I think we'll end on that note. So while you can just tell the people how to get in touch with you and,
Yeah, absolutely. So you can actually find me on Facebook at Walter Wally B Jennings. You can also find me on Instagram at Wally B Jennings. And you can also go to my website, WalterWallyBJennings.com. And you can also visit us at ChosenLifeSpecialist.com as well if you're looking for any premarital counseling or marriage and individual wellness.
Thank you so much. Well, it's been a pleasure, Wally.
Thank you, bro.
You've been somebody I looked up to for a long time, so I'm glad we got to do this. And thank you all for watching another episode of 365 Days of Praise, where every day is a cause for celebration when the cause is worth celebrating. I'm Poe, and I'm out. God bless.